So the way everything was aligned that particular night, I had all of these babies here in the far pasture with Carl underneath the nightlight. And then I had moved Mr. Huck over into this loafing shed here. And that's where I was hoping he would have some time to have some space, close enough to see his friends, but far enough away to where they wouldn't try to bother him and let him have a full night's rest from the whatever had happened to him earlier that day. The birds were in this pasture over here, and the problem is the coyotes came right up this trail. This is the trail that goes down to the woods along the river. They had come right up through here, and they made their way right down along this fence line. They actually came through this gate here, which I had left open, which could have been my first big mistake. And they worked themselves all the way into this pasture where Mr. Huck was at by himself. When I first came out, well, Millie and Fiona were stuck. They were trapped over there in the corner barking. They couldn't get over here. And I don't know exactly where the coyotes got Mr. Huck, but this is the area through here where he was at when I finally got to him. They had drugged him. You can actually still see the drag marks. Sheesh, they had drugged him along all the way outside of this gate. And you know, the thing is, the mistake that I guess I'm guilty of, I guess the biggest mistake is never thinking they would come this close to the house. Never thinking they would come this close to the house. You guys who've been following the page for a while know that we find our cats out here all the time. Our kittens and cats like to walk around and hang out along this section, this area of the pasture. There's a home behind that wall over there. They have their own dogs. And just how shocking. Of course, they had to have passed the pasture with the big birds. Now, I'm not going to say the big birds would have ever gotten up from their spots where they sleep if they had not had an imminent threat. But you could hear the entire hill. You could hear Tex over at the fence line yelling. And this is where Mr. Huck took his final breaths, right here. So, I have known for a long time that the goats were scared to go into the woods. And I always kept questioning why. I'm like, I've been here 100 times. I don't understand why they'd be scared. And then I even, at some point, I remember I made a video talking about they must know something that I don't know. And so obviously they did. And then I feel worse because this was really the only place they had to come forage. And I was trying to encourage them to come over here and forage without me. And I was like, why do you always need me to be here? Every time I would leave the woods, they would follow me back up. And so it got to be where I was trying to sneak off and leave them so they would stay and eat and not just hang out here in the pasture all darn day. But, you know, they knew something that I didn't know. They could smell something that I couldn't smell. They could sense that there was danger in those woods. And then I feel bad because their hunger drove them to the woods to eat. They had to forage, they had to eat. And I wasn't there with them. or I'd just say earlier in that day when Mr. Huck came back with the bites on his ears. You know, you don't know. I had no idea. I didn't know if it was just it could have been that Mr. Huck walked up on a mama raccoon or anything to just, like, you know, bite at him. You know, he could have walked up on someone's den. But now in hindsight, obviously, it was boys are having fun in the hot tub. In the meanwhile, Dad is going to make a round close to the pastures. I'll tell you a little bit about last night from this perspective over here. When I walked outside and I was standing right along through here, Millie and Fiona were over in that corner barking, and I saw the direction they were barking at, looking down towards the darkness of that pasture where Huck was at. I could hear Mr. Huck making these noises. He was in pain. It was a distress call. All of the birds were standing on high alert, but they were not in the same pasture I talked about earlier. The goats were all standing and staring. I couldn't go into that pasture there because Carl was the one watching that pasture. He was standing there, and he was in front of the fence, the gate. So I had to go around the longer way. But I began to holler about here because I could hear the yapping. I had my phone out, and I pressed record, but I wasn't holding it in this position. I was mostly just running with the phone, trying to use the flashlight to spotlight whatever I could. Fairly, hoping to find Huck. But let me set this gun down, this rifle, and I'll use my camera to point. So by the time I got into this point over here, I'll try to zoom in. You can kind of see over there about where the light is at is where I saw the coyotes. I saw at least 3, and they all looked to be the same size. And Huck was screaming, and the coyotes they had him by the ears and by the leg, and they were just grabbing and yapping and yipping. And so it wasn't until I actually opened this gate that I got their attention. Even though I had been hollering and yelling and hollering, that did not seem to get their attention. Millie and Fiona were right here beside me barking. The other dogs were in the house still barking. And when I did, I guess the clinking of the gate, got their attention. Maybe they could hear or feel my footsteps running towards them. But either way, at that point, they dropped Mr. Huck, let him down, and they went off into the woods back behind it. And so I ran over, and at that point, my friends, Mr. Huck was still alive, but I would rather not have to share with you all of the details. But Mr. Huck was not. There was no coming back, my friends. There was no coming back from what shape Mr. Huck was in. But he was still making that same little bleep that Mr. Huck was notorious for, that really sweet little sound that he could make. And he was making that little sweet sound. I don't think he could see me, but he knew I was there. And so I put my hands on him, and I could see all of the things that were wrong. I was shining my flashlight off in the distance to make sure all of the coyotes had left down the hill. And I only saw the eyes reflect back one time, but you still can't be sure of how far they went. So I chose to stay for a while. I loved on Mr. Huck, but he was in extreme pain. Once I loved on Mr. Huck for a little bit, just so he would know that I was there. I did. I turned and I walked away, and I went back to the shop. I was trying to go as fast as I could, and I ran inside the house and went into the safe, and I got my rifle, and then I drove the side-by-side back over, and I parked it. I parked the side-by-side over here, which would have been between. It would have been between the area that the coyotes would have come up from. I left it sitting there running, and then I walked back with my rifle over to where Mr. Huck was at. I don't think Mr. Huck could see me. And I don't think he could even hear me. But he knew I was there, because even in all of that, I could see his little tail wag. I don't know what that meant. But I took my rifle and I made sure that I told Mr. Huck how much I loved him. And I remember I kept telling him how much of a hero and a legend, and how he's going to live forever in our hearts and our minds. And he just looked towards me like he knew, and like he was ready. And I did. I was able to put Mr. Huck out of the pain. I was able to end his misery. And he was ready. He had served his purpose, and he knew it. The shot startled all of these guys. They all stood up, began to walk towards the fence. I put Mr. Huck in the back of the side-by-side, and I parked it inside the shop, knowing that this morning I would go down and do all of the preparations for his cremation and his ceremony. Then I had to call Jamie. Jamie was not here. She was traveling, and having to let Jamie know something that was so hard to tell. I know there are people out there that have had to make phone calls to loved ones, telling them news they don't want to hear. And it felt similar. I mean, granted, it wasn't one of our kids. It wasn't a parent, but it was Mr. Huck, someone who we both had a part in raising from a bottle baby through all of the years of his struggles. And then I had to let her know that Mr. Huck was no more. After that, there's all kinds of things that go through your head. I was able to rest and at peace, knowing that all of these babies here were going to be taken care of. I know that Carl's not going to let anyone in this pasture. I do feel that way. I don't think that Carl would ever stand around and let any one of these babies be hurt. And that's when it began to make me realize that if Huck had been in this pasture, if I had gone ahead and moved Huck into that loafing shed, he may not have been completely at peace because the other goats were going to come by and nibble on his feed, probably try to drink his water. But I wish I had had him closer to his herd. I know that there are safety in numbers. And of course, there was much safety with Carl. You can see him standing there right now, standing above all of his babies, protecting. Even now, as the others sleep, Carl stands guard over these babies. And so that would be one more of those things I add to my list of dumb, stupid human moments. Leaving Mr. Huck over here in the darkness by himself, where he was the most vulnerable, and not putting him inside the pasture with these big birds or with his friends. I learned a lot. But it's too late now. It's too late for Mr. Huck. Maybe the knowledge that you acquire through things like this, the experiences, can help us in the future, will help me make better decisions for next time. So no, I should have never left Huck alone. I should have made sure that he had Carl. Or like Rick said, after Rick and I talked today, Rick said you could have brought a couple of donkeys over and put inside the pasture with him. It probably wouldn't have bothered him none. And animals are very intuitive to know that the other ones, that when there's someone hurt and someone needs to rest. And so life goes on. Here we are about 24 hours after that event. I know that there are coyotes in the woods alongside the river. We've known that for a very long time. We can hear them holler and yip at night. We did not think they would ever come up this close to the house. I never thought they would attack the babies in broad daylight. I was wrong on so many things. Do I think that they will come back? Possibly, if they're hungry enough. But what I will do, what I pledge to do, is make sure that my babies are in here with Carl every night. I would think the more the birds, the better, because these birds are not going to run from a fight, y'all. The females might go to a corner, but the males are going to stand up and do what they have to do. What I have to do is find the new leader. I have to go to Tractor Supply and buy a bell. And I'll buy a new collar. I'm not going to get rid of Huck's collar. It's going to stay somewhere special. But I will buy us a new collar, and I'll more than likely put it on the neck of Brady. He's our biggest and strongest male goat. And he'll be a good leader. You have to ask, though, will he ever be a Mr. Huck? Will he be as brave? Will he put himself in harm's way to save those around him, the way Mr. Huck did? Will he let the weaker goats, the pregnant mamas, will he let them run while he stands there and wards off evil? The way Mr. Huck did. All of that is yet to be determined. For everyone else, it seems like life has got back to normal. But I will say that we're going to feel this loss for a very long time. Mr. Huck has been with us for many years. You guys who follow the page for a while know. You've watched him grow up. You've seen his ups and downs. You rejoiced the day we made him leader of the Wacky Pack, and you've seen him thrive here at this property. He served his purpose, and his life was complete. He died a soldier's death. And it's crazy the way he made sure that everybody was safe. And that more than anything else, of all of the amazing memories I have of our beloved Mr. Huck, that's something that I will never forget. That little goat, I will say, that annoying little goat, that Mr. Hucky, will live on forever. Because I've never seen such a heroic act. And I think that power is within all of us. We see heroes every single day doing things for others, putting others first, realizing that there's some things in life that are more important than yourself. Those folks who run to danger to help instead of turning and running from danger. There's heroes amongst us. There's also heroes amongst these goats. And Mr. Huck was one of them. And that's how we're going to remember him. What I will do from this day forward is walk out every night just to make sure all of my gates are secured. The fences are all, the goats and the big birds are where they need to be. And that won't be able to happen again, not as easily. If anything tries to come inside these pastures, it's going to have a fight. One I don't think they could win. One I don't think they would want to win. So, I want to thank y'all for watching, for supporting us, and for loving us, accepting us with all of our flaws and shortcomings, and still believing that we'll try even harder next time to make the right decisions, and giving us your understanding that this happens. I love the way the birds have all stood up just to remind us that they have this. We have this, Daddy. You don't have to worry. We have this. These goats are safe. They're standing in a back-to-back formation, making sure that every angle is covered. We're lucky to have them. I am sorry about Mr. Huck, everybody. I did not realize how much I loved him until he's gone. And now I miss him. And I know you will miss him too. And I am sorry.